A river moves without concern for what stands inside it. Cold water presses against the legs of a man who has long stopped reacting to discomfort in the normal way. Not because he is strong in any obvious sense, but because repetition has rewritten what his body considers unusual. He bends slightly. Hands enter the current. Fingers search through motion, through debris, through silence disguised as flow. Nothing in this moment suggests history. And yet history has a strange habit of hiding inside ordinary gestures. Because this man, standing waist-deep in an indifferent river, has been struck by lightning more times than almost any human recorded. But that fact does not begin with lightning. It begins with weather that refuses to forget a name. At first, storms are just distance. A flicker beyond mountains. A sound delayed by miles of air. Something you observe the way you observe any natural system, detached, safe, theoretical. The human mind trusts distance. It converts danger into concept when it cannot yet feel it. But distance is not protection. It is only delay. And for a man named Roy Sullivan, delay would eventually collapse into encounter. Roy was a park ranger. His world was not indoors, not controlled, not predictable. It was exposed to rain, mountains, valleys, open sky. Places where weather does not arrive politely. It occupies space instantly. The first strike did not announce itself with meaning. There is no warning system for being statistically erased from expectation. A sudden flash. A pressure in the air that feels less like sound and more like the environment forgetting how to behave. Then impact, not on the ground, but through the body, as if the sky had miscalculated distance and corrected it violently. Roy survived. Burned, shaken, changed. Most people would call it a miracle. But survival does not always feel like salvation. Sometimes it feels like being noticed. Time passed. The human mind does what it always does after disruption. It tries to categorize it. Accident. Rare event. Bad luck. The brain prefers explanations it can contain. Because if one lightning strike happens, it still belongs inside the rules of nature. But rules feel less stable after repetition. And repetition arrived. Another strike. Then another. Each one statistically more absurd than the last, until probability itself begins to feel like a system malfunctioning in real time. Lightning does not remember. It does not track individuals. It does not build patterns. And yet, Roy Sullivan became a pattern others could not ignore. 7 confirmed lightning strikes over a lifetime. 7 moments where the sky aligned in ways that should collapse into impossibility. Not folklore. Not rumor. Documented events. The kind that force science into uncomfortable silence before it attempts to speak again. Because science understands probability, but it struggles with what happens when probability stops feeling abstract. When it becomes a person, something changes in how people look at him. Not fear exactly. Not awe. A subtle distortion of perception, as if proximity to him bends expectation itself. Some avoid standing near him during storms. Others joke, because humor is one of the few ways the mind stabilizes what it cannot compute. But underneath every reaction is the same quiet question. What are the odds? And beneath that question is something deeper, something less mathematical. Why him? But why assumes intention, and nature offers none. Researchers studying lightning survivors describe a pattern that feels almost insulting in its simplicity. Random distribution, geographic exposure, chance alignment of circumstances no one can fully predict. There is no preference, no selection, no memory of past strikes, only conditions repeating in unfamiliar combinations. But the human mind resists this, because randomness is not emotionally livable for long periods. So we reshape it, we turn it into narrative, we call it fate, we call it curse. We call it destiny, but what we are really doing is translating uncertainty into language we can survive. Roy Sullivan continued living inside this contradiction, a man repeatedly intersecting with something ancient and indifferent. Lightning is not modern. It predates civilization, predates language, predates the concept of danger itself. It is the sky's oldest interruption. For billions of years it carved silent signatures across landscapes that had no witnesses. And then humanity arrived and began interpreting those signatures as messages. Warnings, signs, judgments. But lightning has never been a message. It is simply discharge, energy seeking equilibrium without concern for interpretation. The meaning exists only in those who survive it. There is something unsettling about repeated survival, not because it suggests protection, but because it suggests exposure that did not end. Each strike leaves behind more than physical damage. It alters the boundary between expectation and reality. After enough events, the mind begins to adjust its model of the world. Storms are no longer distant. They are anticipated, prepared for, internalized. The sky stops being background. It becomes possibility, always present, always unresolved. By the time Roy Sullivan had experienced multiple strikes, the world had already begun to treat him differently, not as a person inside probability, but as an exception to it. Yet exceptions are only illusions created by scale. Zoom far enough into randomness and anomalies appear. Zoom further and they dissolve again. But human life does not operate at that scale. It operates at the scale of experience. And experience is where mathematics becomes emotional. There is a quiet irony here. We believe lightning chooses. We believe luck selects. We believe randomness must still obey some hidden moral structure. Because without structure, suffering feels meaningless. And meaningless events are the hardest to accept. So we build stories around them. We turn survival into purpose. We turn misfortune into identity. We turn probability into personality. But nature does not participate in this translation. It continues without acknowledgement. Storms form. Discharge happens. Energy equalizes. No memory remains. Except in human minds. Roy Sullivan's story became something larger than him. Not because of what happened, but because of what it forces us to confront. That existence does not distribute events fairly. It distributes them statistically. And statistics do not care about individual coherence. They care about aggregates, populations, not people. Imagine standing outside during a storm. Wind shifting direction in invisible layers. Clouds rearranging themselves like slow machinery. You feel distance collapsing in small increments. And you realize something uncomfortable. There is no boundary between safe and unsafe. Only time. Only probability unfolding. And every second you remain unharmed is not proof of protection. It is only unfinished chance. This is where the story stops being about lightning and becomes about interpretation itself. Because the human mind cannot experience pure randomness without transforming it. We are meaning-making systems trapped inside indifferent physics. So even when nothing is intended, we behave as if it is. Even when nothing is chosen, we feel selected. Even when nothing remembers us, we feel remembered. Roy Sullivan eventually lived long enough for his story to become legend-like, not because it became less real, but because reality itself felt insufficient to contain it. 7 strikes, a number that feels symbolic even when it is not. And yet symbolism is not in the event. It is in the observer. There is a final thought that remains after all explanations collapse. Not about lightning, not about survival, but about exposure. Some lives intersect with rare events so often that the mind wants to assign them meaning beyond probability. But meaning may not exist at that layer. It may only emerge afterward, constructed, not discovered. And if that is true, then the most unsettling possibility is not that Roy Sullivan was unlucky. It is that luck was never something he could be separate from. Only something he continuously passed through. Like weather. Like time. Like existence itself. And so the river continues moving, indifferent, unconcerned. The man in it does not wait for answers anymore, because answers assume the world is asking something. And by now, he has learned it is not. The sky never asked, it only happened. And somewhere between survival and silence, between probability and experience, a final realization settles quietly. Nothing was ever chosen, but everything still occurred. And that is the part the human mind never fully learns to accept, no matter how many times it is struck.